YouTube.com. This is Historical Gun Weeb, name subject to change in the future. This video is just about why to not always trust gun shops. It's not meant to just shit on all gun shops. It's not meant to kiss their ass. It's just kind of here to let you know some stuff I think is significant. Keep in mind, they're there to get a sale. Some shops even do commission, meaning the people selling you a gun will get a part of the sale money sometimes, so you have to keep that in mind. Usually it's not a lot, but it is something to think about. And additionally, their job is to sell you guns. Their job's not to tell you maybe save up a little bit more so you could get something a little bit better for home defense or hunting or whatever. Their job is to sell you on what they got. And that's something to keep in mind. Kind of would be foolish, honestly, not to keep that in mind. Then, also shops like Cabela's are taught not to sway customers if they want something bad. If you want a Turkish shotgun for home defense, they're going to let you make that mistake. And they'll also push what they have in stock, even if it's not suitable for your needs. I've seen a one big box store push some pretty crappy guns during a gun buying panic because that's all they had. They didn't have ARs or AKs or anything behind the counter. And their pistol selection was pretty slim, so if they'd recommend a rifle, sometimes they would recommend something that's not that good. Then stuff to think about is, even if they do like guns, they might have biases. They might push 1911s. They might push Glocks. Like on an older lady, sometimes they have harder times pulling the slides back. Glock might not be the best choice. Smith & Wesson Easy Slide might be a good choice, or a revolver. But, they might just want to push Glocks because that's what they believe in. That's what they believe God thinks is the best gun in the world, Glock, and it's best for everything. It's good for a lot of stuff. It's serviceable. If you're going to push something, at least push something reliable like that. But, they don't always take into consideration what the individual's need is. Sometimes the individual's need isn't what they prefer. Then, they may also be limited on what you want. If you say you only want a big 44 Magnum for home defense and you're 100 pounds soaking wet, they're going to recommend you 44 Magnums, most likely. They don't always try to sway you out of it. Then another thing we're going to go into is some examples. One of my friends who's in California wanted a gun for self-defense. High-calorie American pushes Smith & Wesson M500 on him. He was about 100 pounds, kind of newer to shooting. And M500, it's a great sidearm for hunting in bear country or something, or for hunting even. But for self-defense, it's going to over-penetrate. That's something to keep in mind. And one shot pushed on me a Turkish semi-auto shotgun for home defense. Look up on TFB TV or James Reeve Turkish shotguns, and you'll see one that's not the best idea. One of my close friends who wanted a handgun, he wanted to save up more and just look. Big box store suckered him into a crappy gun that didn't reliably function. In this case, it was a Smith & Wesson SV9 that just not being shot one range trip of 80 rounds. By the next range trip, a couple weeks later, it was not functioning properly. It needed to be cleaned, and then it shot fine. But maybe not the gun to push on someone, especially if they're willing to save up, like he was planning to. But the shop wanted to make the sale right then and there. Didn't want them to change their mind or go somewhere else. One friend asked a gun store, I like my Glock, but I want something like it, but not another Glock. Salesman told him, close your eyes and try this gun. Gun's unloaded, of course. Then when he opens his eyes after holding it, it's another Glock. Like, you know, you could maybe recommend a different polymer pistol. I know there's Smith & Wesson makes some, CZ makes some, Beretta makes some, everyone makes some, but, you know, it is what it is. And there's ways to prevent this kind of stuff. And again, it's not purely just shitting on gun shops, it's just trying to give people some reality. They're salesmen, they're there to make a sale, kind of like used cars salesmen, you know, they might push you crap once in a while, though not nearly to that degree, usually. But there's ways to prevent it. If you're a new gun owner, watch buyer's guides from 3 different people, and you should have a basic idea on things to look for, like caliber, brands to avoid or get. And, you know, if you have a friend who's a gun nerd, ask them. A FUD gun is better than an unreliable self-defense gun, you know. 1911 might be better than a guy who would push certain brands of handguns. And for sake of not irking potential new viewers, I will leave it at that. But, you know, there's the great gun shops kind of seem outnumbered by more not so good gun shops, in my opinion. Unfortunately, most gun shops I go to kind of suck. Some of the pawn shops I go to are pretty good, but it's something you kind of have to know what you're looking for, because you're generally going to get deals at pawn shops if you actually have a really good pawn shop, or a pawn shop who doesn't know what they have. And usually with the basic stuff, they know that stuff pretty good and price it way over what you could get a new one for. Some channels I'd recommend if you're a newer person into guns: try TFB TV, Lucky Gunner, Iraq Veteran 8888, Mr. Guns and Gear, Collier Noir, Paul Harrell. These channels are going to have pretty good stuff. I haven't really watched a lot of older, like I haven't watched a lot of these people in quite a while, to be honest, but I'm sure their advice is still pretty good. I know when I was getting started, Iraq Veteran 8888 had some great videos years ago. Then, you know, some knowledge is better than none. You know, if you just learn from a video, Glock and Beretta are good brands, you know, that's better. You know, a shop might be trying to push on you an HK or Smith & Wesson or something that might be, you know, a better fit for you, which that's debatable. I'd say a Glock it's going to be fine for most people, though the HK honestly might be better. But, you know, you're going to have a good gun if you have a Glock, or if you get a Beretta or an HK, or, you know, you're going to get a good gun if you get any of those brands. Might not be the best, but it'll do the job, that's for sure. And if you don't know much, maybe that's what you need to know. Just buy a Glock. Though, depending on who you are personally, might not personally recommend it. You know, and know what's good for you. If you're an older lady, you might not want a Glock. You might want the Smith & Wesson Easy Slide 380. If you're in an apartment, you might want a handgun. You probably won't want a rifle. In the country, you might want a rifle. You know, that's probably going to be better. Or if your house is made of brick, a rifle might be better. If you're not a gun guy, trust the channels I mentioned earlier. And beware of gun forums and groups. I have seen some of the best advice I've ever gotten in those groups, but I have also seen some of the worst dog shit recommendations from gun forums and groups. Though usually it's good, just beware. And don't be afraid to go with what you're familiar with, even if it's not the best. Examples: when my dad was worried about looting and rioting, I let him borrow my SKS because that's what he's familiar with. I gave him the option of the AR. He said he's not familiar with it and he doesn't feel like learning it. He would rather just use the SKS, which, you know, if that's what you're familiar with, it's better than handing someone something they're unfamiliar with. Though if you have time, probably better to learn in AR or AK or, I don't know, there's a lot of good semi-auto rifles. If you're in the country, maybe you want a 308, you know, and you want to learn the G3 or an FAL, you know, all power to you. But if, you know, that's all, if you're familiar with an SKS and, you know, all the power to you, you should probably upgrade, but it'll do the job, you know. I know a couple people who are a little bit old school, and they used the revolver back when they were in law enforcement, and they are incredibly accurate with snub nose revolvers, and that's what they feel comfortable carrying, and they actually shoot more accurately with that than their Glocks in one of their cases, ironically, which is really surprising. But it's because of practice. So if you're really familiar with something, you don't want to get rid of it, don't, you know, don't let people bully you just because it's outdated. But, I mean, if you're using a bolt action for home defense, you probably should. But, you know, that said, modern pistols and rifles with standard capacity might be best. But if you're in a banned state, revolver, nothing against it. If you have 10 round limit anyways, might as well get a Smith & Wesson 686 plus or something. Or, you know, a Mini 14, you know, that's pretty nice for a band state. Or, you know, 1911, or, you know, a compact pistol that's going to take 10 rounds anyways because it's God's caliber 45 or something. But anyways, hope you all like the video. If you think I've earned a subscription, please subscribe, like the video, comment. Thank you very much.